America's online future is in the spotlight. Debate is intensifying on what equal access means and who gets to determine its rules. On one side are consumers and content producers, and on the other, internet service providers like Verizon, Comcast and AT&T. This week, the US Federal Communications Commission will start looking at winding back net neutrality rules, which could create an online world accessed at two different speeds. The net neutrality principle means internet service providers need to treat all content, applications and web services equally. And that determines how online traffic works. When a person gets on the internet superhighway, they can head to a variety of destinations. They can shop at a mall, look at a messaging app or seek answers to a medical question. And no matter where they want to go, they can access destinations at the same speed. But if net neutrality is taken away, ISPs could choose to speed up or slow down access to certain content, prioritising how quickly you can get from A to B. The FCC approved net neutrality rules in 2015.
The action that we take today is an irrefutable reflection of the principle that no one, whether government or corporate, should control free and open access to the internet.
It's prevented internet companies from charging money for better access to content. But the new head of the FCC, Ajit Pai, wants to wind it back. Ending heavy-handed internet regulation will increase infrastructure investment, promote competition and create jobs. He's promised open and public consultations on the changes, but it's likely to pass by the end of this year. Across the world, there are different approaches to net neutrality. It's upheld in countries like Canada, India and Brazil. In the EU, net neutrality rules enshrined in 2016 mean that every European must have access to the open internet. It's a principle which upholds the rights of end users and aims to create a fairer playing field for content providers. But equal access to the digital world doesn't extend everywhere. In China, Iran, Turkey, Russia and North Korea, the government decides which content will be accessible and deliberately throttles or blocks sites. So is it actually possible to have a free and open internet which is neutral to corporate and government interests? Natalie Pohonen, The Newsmakers.
We're joined by Cynthia Koo from Toronto. She's the legal and digital advisor at Open Media. Cynthia, thank you very much for joining us. So we're going to begin with the US in this specific context in the United States, and then we're going to broaden it out. So first of all, why are you for net neutrality?
First, thanks very much for having me. So net neutrality has been described as the First Amendment of the internet, and the reason that I'm for it and that other people should be for it is because it ensures that all of our data is treated equally, that no matter who you are, you will have an equal ability to communicate and to access all of the amazing content and services that are online.
Okay, the FTC's acting Republican chairman, Maureen Ohlhausen, said, quote, "Net neutrality regulation reflects a lack of confidence in market forces that I do not share. Antitrust can protect the competitive sphere in which edge providers and ISPs operate." So basically, there are laws. If companies want to cheat, there are laws that will stop them from cheating or punish them for cheating. Why do you need all of this regulation?
Well, so there are a couple parts to that. The first one is that the market forces aspect. The second is the antitrust aspect. So showing the lack of faith in market forces, I think a lot of people would say that market forces are not sufficient, because if you look at the market of internet service providers, whether in the United States or in the Canadian context, which I'm a little bit more familiar with, there is so much concentration. People do not have choice over who they access internet services from. And so that is not necessarily the case to begin with. As for antitrust, there's a reason that telecommunications law is has its own special provisions. It's not just like any other thing that you buy in a store. Telecommunications is a vital component of us functioning in our everyday lives. And so if you're providing such an important service, it makes sense that people would provide for equal access to that service.
Okay, but then, let's try and compare this to a normal service in life that everybody should have equal access to, like, say, the post, right? But then if I want UPS to get my post to me a little bit faster than they usually do, I pay a little bit extra and they do an express service delivery for my $20 and I get it in a day rather than my $10 and I get it in 2 days. Isn't this exactly the same thing that service providers will be doing?
Well, the problem, however, is that the internet would not have become what it is today if it weren't for this principle of net neutrality as its bedrock foundation. So the fact that you can access whatever you like online, and not only that, but if you're a news organization, for instance, the fact that you can access audiences on an equal basis with a larger competitor is what made the internet the revolutionary platform that it is today. So if you were to, say, do away with net neutrality, for example, then that would essentially, you would break one of the foundational features of the internet.
But isn't it just the internet sort of maturing and becoming just like everything else, where it gets absorbed into human behavior, where individuals and power systems vie for influence? And that's why, just like UPS, as I'm saying, we're not saying that nobody or people are being blocked from the right to post, but that some people, if they pay more, can get a better postal experience. Nevertheless, I know you're going to disagree with me here. I'm playing devil's advocate. Let's broaden it out a little bit. Tell me how this relates to countries that were mentioned in Natalie's report, like China, like North Korea, like Turkey, like Saudi Arabia and Russia, and so on. Do you believe that these sovereign countries have a right to control the tap, have a right to control the content, have a right to control what people access, what people post within their borders on the internet?
Well, I'll touch on your first point first about, isn't this the internet just maturing and becoming like everything else in real life and succumbing to human behavior? And I think that's a really good point. That could be something that's happening, but that's something that we should be questioning. Is that something that should be happening? Do we want the same, for instance, forces of inequity, discrimination, socioeconomic equality that we do see in real life? One of the major promises of the internet was that it would help address and alleviate these things and not simply succumb to and perpetuate them. As for your second part of your question, in terms of these other countries, do they have the right to control this access? Well, it's a bit tricky if not being from those countries to speak on behalf of people from those countries or their governments.
But I'm sure you have an opinion.
But I will point out, oh yes, exactly. But I will point out that the United Nations did acknowledge internet access as a human right in 2011, and they passed a non-binding resolution last year saying that to shut down people's internet did count as a violation. And when you look at government control over the internet and correlate it to, for instance, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and correspondingly the level of democracy in those societies, then you can see that there is a correlation with basically the more control you have. If you're going to control the internet, control people's access to information, access to communication, that's going to have a negative impact on it. For instance, if you're trying to have a free and democratic society.
Cynthia, I've got to wrap, but it's been good to talk to you. Cynthia Koo, thanks for joining us from Toronto.